Have you ever experienced a moment when something seemed to be seen or heard within you, even though nothing was physically in front of your eyes or ears? A sudden clarity, an image in the mind or in front of you that feels more real than imagination, or a quiet knowing that seems to arrive rather than be thought out. Or sometimes you hear a real voice, but you realize that no one else can hear it except you. Or do you smell the real scent of a specific flower or fruit, even though it isn't present in your physical surroundings? Many people across different cultures and times have described such experiences in various ways. This raises an interesting question. Do we possess inner senses, or that are already active but usually unnoticed? Or are they capacities that must be awakened through certain states of mind, such as contemplation, prayer, or deep reflection? This content examines this question through the lens of Hildegard of Bingen's visionary experiences. It places her idea of inner senses in dialogue with biblical accounts of prophetic visions, and asks how various figures such as Hildegard in Revelation understood their encounters with divine reality. Rather than seeing these experiences as merely symbolic or purely supernatural, it sees them as part of a broader human effort to describe perception that goes beyond ordinary physical awareness. In doing so, it invites you to reflect on a deeper question. Are the boundaries of sight and hearing, smell, taste, or other perceptual senses as fixed as they seem? Or does human perception include dimensions that are often overlooked but always present? Hildegard of Bingen, from 1098 to 1179, Doctor of Church, artist, healer, and known as Sibyl of the Rhine, occupies a rare place in the history of Christian mysticism. She does not merely claim to think about divine realities, but to perceive them through what she describes as the living light. She consistently explains her visions as involving an inner capacity of seeing and hearing that does not depend on the physical body. In her writings, especially in Book of Divine Works, Hildegard articulates her visions with exceptional detail, demonstrating the intensity and consistency of her inner senses. This level of clarity and structure distinguishes her from many other spiritual figures of her era, whose visionary experiences were not expressed with the same degree of coherence or symbolic depth. She declares,
"Around the 6th year, after I had already spent 5 years experiencing intense and extraordinary visions, I began to understand something profound. Through what I can only describe as a vision of eternal light, I was shown, despite being uneducated, a deep insight into different ways of human life. I was about 56 years old at the time, when one particular vision came to me with overwhelming force. It was so powerful that my whole body trembled, and I became physically weak and ill. For 7 years, I tried to write about it, though I struggled to fully complete the task. This happened around the year 1163, during a time of turmoil in the church. In the midst of this, I heard a voice, clear and commanding, speaking to me.
You who have suffered greatly, though your body has endured much, you have been filled with the depth of divine mystery. What you see and hear within yourself is not meant to remain hidden. Share it, so that humanity may come to know its Creator and learn to honor the divine with sincerity. Write not from your own will, but as a witness to what has been revealed to you. For this truth does not come from you, nor from any human source. It comes from the eternal, beyond beginning and end. What you are shown has been known since before the world began, and it speaks to what humanity has always needed.
She began to write with a trembling hand, even as she was burdened by many illnesses. As she undertook the task of writing, she continually turned to the true and living light for guidance on what she should record. For everything she had written in her earlier visions, and what she came to understand afterward, she perceived under the influence of heavenly mysteries, while her body was fully awake and her mind remained clear and sound. She perceived it with the inner eye of her spirit and understood it through her inner hearing. She emphasized that she was never in a state resembling sleep, nor was she carried away in spiritual rapture, as she had already clarified in her earlier visions. Moreover, she did not interpret or explain anything based on human feelings or personal imagination, but only recorded what she received from heavenly mysteries. Once again, she heard a voice from heaven instructing her, saying,
Write down what I tell you.
In the biblical foundations of vision, God is revealed beyond the physical senses. The Bible frequently describes encounters with God that transcend ordinary sensory perception. One of the clearest examples appears in the call of the prophet Samuel. The Lord came and stood there, calling as at the other times, Samuel, Samuel. 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 10. Here, hearing is not physical in the normal sense. It is a form of divine communication that requires interpretation and spiritual readiness. Similarly, the Apostle Paul describes a transformation of perception when he writes, "We live by faith, not by sight." 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7. This distinction between physical sight and spiritual understanding is central to biblical thought. It suggests that there is a kind of seeing that does not depend on the eyes alone. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 11, verse 3, we read, "And he shall not judge after the sight of his eyes, neither reprove after hearing his ears." Hildegard's concept of inner vision aligns closely with this idea. She does not claim to perceive ordinary physical objects, but rather to receive structured symbolic realities that she understands as divine communication. In describing her first vision through On the Origin of Life of the Book of Divine Works, she declares,
"And I saw within the mystery of God in the midst of the southern breezes a wondrously beautiful image. It had a human form, and its countenance was of such beauty and radiance that could have more easily gazed at the sun than at that face." A broad golden ring circled its head. In this ring above the head, there appeared a second countenance, like that of an elderly man, its chin and bread resting on the crown of the first head. On both sides of the figure, a wing grew out of the shoulders. The wings rose above the above-mentioned ring and were joined there. At the topmost part of the right wing's curve appeared an eagle's head. Its eyes were like fire, and in them the brilliance of angles streamed forth as in a mirror. On the topmost part of the left wing's curve was a human head, which shone like the gleaming of the stars. Both faces were turned towards the east. From the shoulders of the figure, a wing extended to its knees. The figure was wrapped in a garment that shone like the sun. Its hands carried a lamb, which shone like a brilliant day. The figure's feet trod upon a monster of dreadful appearance, poisonous and black, and a serpent, which had fastened its teeth onto the monster's right ear. Its body was wound obliquely across the monster's head. Its tail extended on the left side as far as the feet.
To understand her experiences, it is helpful to read them through two lenses at once: the spiritual framework of medieval Christianity and the broader biblical tradition of prophetic vision. When placed in dialogue with Scripture, especially the visions of Ezekiel, Daniel, and John in Revelation, Hildegard's inner senses can be seen as part of a long biblical pattern of symbolic, revelatory perception. The closest biblical parallel to Hildegard's visionary experience is the prophet Ezekiel. In the opening of his book, Ezekiel describes an overwhelming encounter with divine reality. The heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. The book of Ezekiel, 1st chapter, 1st verse. What follows is not a literal scene, but a highly symbolic vision. 4 living creatures with multiple faces, wheels within wheels full of eyes, and radiant fire moving within them. Ezekiel chapter 1, verses 4 through 28. This is strikingly similar to Hildegard's visions, which also feature composite beings with multiple symbolic forms, radiant light as a sign of divine presence, structured, almost geometric organization of meaning. In both cases, vision is not passive observation, but symbolic cognition. Divine truths are expressed in visual form because ordinary language is insufficient. The Book of Daniel presents vision as an interpreted mystery, offering another important model. Daniel repeatedly receives visions that he does not immediately understand, requiring angelic interpretation. I heard, but I did not understand. So I asked, "My Lord, what will the outcome of all this be?" Daniel chapter 12, verse 8. Similarly, Hildegard often describes her visions as requiring explanation or theological elaboration after the experience. She does not treat them as self-explanatory images, but as structured revelations whose meaning unfolds through reflection. Daniel's visions of beasts representing kingdoms in Book of Daniel similarly parallel Hildegard of Bingen's symbolic figures, which often represent cosmic forces, virtues, or divine attributes rather than literal creatures. In both cases, imagery is used to convey abstract realities such as power, history, and moral order. The Book of Revelation, as the full expansion of symbolic vision, represents the most intense form of biblical visionary language. John writes, "I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and I heard behind me a loud voice." Revelation chapter 1, verse 10. Like Hildegard, John emphasizes a shift into a different mode of perception in the Spirit, which enables him to see heavenly realities. His visions include multi-headed beasts, radiant thrones, and cosmic battle imagery. Hildegard's visions resemble this in their intensity and symbolic density. However, while Revelation often emphasizes apocalyptic conflict, Hildegard's visions tend to emphasize cosmic harmony and divine order. Her imagery is less about the end of history and more about the structure of creation itself. According to Hildegard's concept of the inner senses, the living light and spiritual perception reveal that she describes her experience in a way that closely parallels biblical visionary language, but adds a distinctive psychological clarity. She writes that she sees in a living light and hears within her soul, not through bodily senses. This idea resonates with biblical themes such as the eyes of your heart being enlightened. Ephesians chapter 1, verse 18. Here, Paul suggests that understanding itself involves a kind of vision beyond physical sight. Hildegard radicalizes this concept by treating it as an actual experiential mode of perception, an inner seeing that carries structured symbolic content. Importantly, she insists that she does not fabricate these visions. Instead, she experiences them as something received. This aligns with biblical prophetic traditions, in which revelation is understood as given, not invented. From a spiritual and experiential perspective, Hildegard's inner senses can be understood as part of the biblical tradition of prophetic vision, a mode of consciousness in which divine truth is perceived symbolically rather than conceptually. From a historical and psychological perspective, her visions can also be understood as deeply structured contemplative experiences arising within the context of monastic life, shaped by prayer, fasting, illness, and intense theological reflection. These two readings are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Instead, they highlight two dimensions of the same phenomenon. First, the experiential dimension, understood as a highly vivid, internally generated visionary state. And second, the theological dimension, interpreted as divine communication within a Christian worldview. Hildegard of Bingen's concept of inner senses belongs to a long biblical tradition in which divine reality is perceived beyond ordinary sight and hearing. From Samuel's call to Ezekiel's wheels of fire, to Daniel's symbolic beasts, to John's apocalyptic visions, Scripture repeatedly portrays revelation as something experienced through transformed perception. Hildegard stands within this tradition, but gives it a distinctive expression. Her visions are not primarily historical predictions or narrative revelations, but structured symbolic worlds in which divine order, cosmic harmony, and moral meaning are made visible. Whether understood spiritually as divine illumination or historically as visionary consciousness shaped by medieval religious life, her work continues the biblical conviction that reality is deeper than what the physical senses alone can perceive, and that sometimes truth must be seen and heard within the inner life of the soul. By examining and studying these visions and identifying their parallels in the Bible, several key insights emerge. First, the existence of God as an intelligent and creative source becomes undeniable to us. Second, it becomes clear that God, through individuals considered to be divinely chosen, has demonstrated how symbolic language functions as a means of communication through which messages from the inner realm are conveyed to them. Third, as listeners or observers of these narratives, we come to realize that we are not simply this physical body. We also possess a subtle, invisible form that is inaccessible to physical sight, but has vast potential capacities. We also recognize that humans have abilities that go beyond simply meeting material and physical needs. We are inspired to discover and understand the mechanisms by which these latent capacities within us can be awakened and activated. We may also recognize and enhance the potential of our minds, reaching a level beyond repetitive and mundane daily life. At this point, we realize that such insights are not confined to a separate spiritual or religious thought, but become an integral part of our daily lived experience. From this recollection, a quiet transformation begins. Human life becomes more than survival or repetition. It becomes a journey toward the unfolding of hidden capacities, a movement toward inner awakening. In this light, even the idea of divinity changes. God is no longer confined to distant heavens or sacred spaces, special places or ornate altars. Rather, divinity becomes an inseparable reality in the fabric of everyday life, an intimate presence in being itself. In the silent depths of each moment, the unseen reality in the ordinary breath of life.